Can you beat Monster Hunter World without taking damage? Yes. Yes, you can. Team Darkside did it years ago. But I am not Team Darkside. So the real question is, can I beat Monster Hunter World without taking damage? Find out here with me as we make a fresh new character and run through the game, embarking on a challenge once more. Last time I beat the game without hitting anything, and now I need to do the reverse. Welcome to Bison Gaming.
Look out below!
Okay, so what are the rules? Because I'm doing things a little differently from Team Darkside. Firstly, no bows or bowguns, and also no defender or guardian gear. Gotta one-up Team Darkside somewhere, and I figure this may as well be it. You can call me a petty little bitch, because I am, but I've always wanted to be able to say I achieved something Team Darkside did not, and doing things that they did, plus one more stipulation, scratches that itch. Slinger and siege equipment is fair game, though, just no bows or bowguns. Similar to their Iceborne video, taking damage results in an immediate abandoned quest or return from expedition, not a game restart. However, all quests and expeditions follow this rule to include any and all farming of monsters. This is because, personally, I do not see beating a monster without taking damage using gear you attained through taking damage as having beaten said monster without taking damage. You may disagree, it's a personal stance of mine, and it's not about proving I can do it, but about actually doing it, so there we go. Number 3, taking damage is all-inclusive, to include not only large monsters, but small monsters and map damage as well. If my health bar moves, then no matter the cause, that is a fail. Number 4, the Vitality Mantle is not allowed either, except in circumstances where taking damage is completely 100% unavoidable, and no other actions or skills I can take is capable of remedying that. There is exactly one source of damage in the entire base game that this condition applies to. Lastly, the victory condition for the base game for this challenge is to beat Xeno'jiiva. With all that out of the way, we start our journey by slaying 7 Jagras. My weapon of choice is the Sword and Shield. Gotta make Joe Cat proud. Am I right?
This is it, the Big Daddy, the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning of the end of every monster's career. The only reason every monster isn't extinct yet is because Capcom is sure to hold this beast back with 1,000 locks and chains.
It's one of the weapons I'm most familiar with, is tied for fastest unsheathed movement speed. It's a mounting machine, has iframes on the backstep, can apply traps while the weapon is out, fastest sheathing speed in the game if I need to emergency Superman dive. There's no better option for this kind of run than the SNS. This quest is pathetically easy for the very fact that they are simple monsters and therefore Jagras are susceptible to torch pods. And the game conveniently gives you some right in the arena that you fight Jagras in. For those unaware, torch pods fired into the ground will cause a lasting fire effect that has a myriad of uses. 2 of those uses are dispelling effluvium in the Vale and scaring small monsters, causing them to stay still and shout at the fire until the problem goes away. Also called the Twitter approach. There are a very select handful of monsters that this effect doesn't apply, but we'll get there later. For now, our next quest is the Kestodon Kerfluffle, which goes exactly the same way, and then it's on to our first large monster, Great Jagras. So, as it turns out, when monsters can actually hit you back, it becomes significantly tougher to avoid taking damage. Who'da thunk it? I learned very quickly that fighting monsters straight up was viable in short bursts, if I were very, very, very careful about where I do so, but it's risky, unreliable, and not worth it unless I have an active objective in mind, such as triggering a status ailment. Smaller Jagras were also a problem in this quest, as torch pods only work for so long, and it's not like I couldn't kill an entire large monster in the 45 seconds torch pods do their thing using base level gear. Thus, my playstyle adapted as thus. Play for the down. Our objective is to keep the monster incapacitated for as long and often as possible. Flinch shots whenever possible, mount spam, but only while the monster is enraged, paralysis, targeting the monster's legs, engaging them in areas they won't fight back. These kinds of things would be my primary method of fighting monsters. With this new strategy adopted, I put together a trap using tinged meats in this location here for Great Jagras, and attempted to chain him down and keep aggression up. Great Jagras won't fight you in a hallway, and when he gets back up, will retreat immediately to the previous zone. A cleverly placed pitfall trap on his return trip can make this last just a little bit longer. Still, my attempts were thwarted once he got back to the main zone and started fighting me with his minions. But after a few more attempts, I got the perfect chain of downs and slayed Great Jagras before he was ever able to retreat. In fact, I even slayed him before he ran back to my pitfall trap. This first hunt convinced me that as long as I played smart and used all the mechanics I knew about, this challenge was possible. It served as my blueprint for strategies in the future, and I learned a lot about how to approach this challenge from this run. All said and done, Great Jagras took 6 attempts. Next, I went on the expedition prior to fighting Kulu-Ya-Ku, colonized the bug trappers into indentured servitude, and equipped the flashfly cage to my cat. This would be one of my biggest assets, as no other tool is capable of incapacitating monsters as the flashfly cage tool. Even against elders where the shock traps wouldn't work, constant flashes and the guaranteed stagger from boom bugs is much more valuable than the raw damage or stat buffs in this particular kind of run. With the new tool, Kulu-Ya-Ku went down very fast, only taking 2 attempts. Not much more to say here. Oh, here's a fun fact about Kulu-Ya-Ku. Okay, so I mentioned in my last video about drifting dragons, go watch it by the way, that I own the Monster Hunter Worlds board game, and I have the Kickstarter exclusive Kulu-Ya-Ku expansion. Prior to a fight in a campaign setting, it simulates tracking and looking for the monster via a choose-your-own-adventure-esque booklet, with several storylines for each monster. And for some reason, Kulu-Ya-Ku is depicted in the choose-your-own-adventure as, like, the single most threatening and dangerous monster, prone to start a civil war of monsters amid the ancient forest. And it's so silly and ridiculous, and I love it.
The sounds of the battle recede into the ambient noise of the forest. The chirps of birds, the rasping of the river, the cries of monsters above everything else. You heard dozens of such battles erupting in recent days. Finding Kulu-Ya-Ku is vital, before the entire forest becomes a war zone. The arms of Kulu-Ya-Ku are raised, as if in prayer or submission, but the bird-like face behind them shows no signs of anything but animal fear. Oh, you're moving off my belly? Okay. Later, buddy. Yeah, my room's a bit of a mess. Shut up. But the bird-like face behind them shows no signs of anything but animal fury. As its jaws open with a piercing screech, you heft your weapons. Blood is about to be shed.
Progress through the beginning portion of the game was slow but steady, and not too unbearably slow either. Puke Puke took 7 attempts and became the source of our first real weapon upgrade. Puke weapons are relatively solid at the beginning of the game, as they have decent raw, and the poison is always a very helpful addition. Unfortunately, while I have some footage of my first encounters with Barroth, I didn't kill him until my next recording session, which got corrupted along with Geratotus, so I lost the footage of my first victories over these monsters. However, it took me 8 tries to kill Barroth, and I think somewhere in the realm of 4 or 5 for Jera, not entirely sure. I do have footage of me killing Barroth hitless later in my playthrough, however, when I needed some Barroth materials for something. But not for Jera, unfortunately. Luckily, this was the only recording that got corrupted in the challenge run, so there won't be any more of that. I remember Jera being tricky due to the Gajau in the area, but I was able to circumvent a lot of these issues by firing a torch pod on the little islands in the swamp. After Jera, I got a new, very powerful tool for the entire duration of the run, the Ghillie Mantle. Free sharpening and a free jumping mounting attack on a monster every time I use it. Hard to beat that in a hitless run like this. With this new tool, I entered the smoothest chunk of the game for me, where I proceeded to first try Tobi Kadachi, making his Vambraces for Evade Extender, and then also first try Anjanath. I'm not gonna lie, Anjanath's large hitboxes and range made me kind of scared, even if I know the fight like the back of my hand. For those not in the know, Anja can go into a fiery rage mode separate from being enraged, and you can tell he's in this mode because his throat will start glowing red hot. During this super enraged state is when all of his bite attacks will have fire after effects and have more lasting hitboxes, and it ends with his giant breath attack as he sneezes the last of his flammable mucus at you. However, using heavy slinger ammo, such as scatter nuts or slinger bombs dropped from Anja, or using puddle pods, a couple shots to his face will very quickly knock him out of his super enraged state and have a guaranteed knockdown. Anjanath is one of the few monsters that will eat tinged or poisoned meat when hungry as well. Granted, he didn't go for it in this hunt, but still. I did have a very close call when I was in range of his tailspin attack and couldn't get out, and as a panic and last resort threw up my shield. By some miracle, I managed to fully block the attack without taking a single point of chip damage. I thought for sure this attack would be strong enough to chip me, but I guess not. I guess it's just a really weak attack. Witness here, the one and only time I blocked an attack in this entire run. Not sure how I didn't take damage, but I'll take it. These two monsters were two of only 3 I managed to beat in the first try in the entire run, by the way. I then farmed Baroth, as I mentioned before, so I could get his weapon and progress to the Anjanath tree, since the high raw of Anja is well worth the negative affinity during the early portions of the game specifically, when overall damage is quite low anyways, and then it was on to Zora. My first attempt at Zora was brought to a swift end by forgetting that the hostile wingdrakes were totally a thing. So, to be on the safe side, I relegated myself to just sitting on the barrier and right below it during the second attempt, and using just those artillery. Once we were on Zora, I had one more issue. Magma cores have an aura around them that does heat damage. And at this stage in the game, both the Heat Guard skill and Cool Drinks are unavailable to us. This means we cannot get near any of the magma cores in an attempt, or the attempt is lost. Now, strictly speaking, breaking the magma cores aren't required for quest completion and don't give anything except part break materials at the end of the quest. And we are not in need of Zora Magdaros gear. Yet.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
However, the thing I would actually like to do is go around and collect the massive amounts of red ore on this map. But I can't do that because of the magma cores. For those not in the know, each magma core destroyed actually changes the map that is Zora's shell. There is a trail and flow of magma on the left and right side that you cannot cross when you first load into the map, and these magma flows disappear after their corresponding magma core is destroyed. Now, technically, they don't actually lock you out of any part of the map, because with their placement, you can go this way. However, this is not an option for me because doing so requires I go around the magma core, which I cannot do, meaning that I am relegated to only this tiny portion of the map, which has unfortunately only 2 ore spots, so I can only get an extremely small handful of ore until I'm thrown into fighting Nergigante, which sucks. Now, in my last challenge run video, I expressed panic that my Palico couldn't spawn onto Zora at first, and wondered how I would take down Nergigante without hitting him, and then expressed relief when he magically appeared for just that portion of the quest. And my comment section was flooded with comments about how you don't actually need to repel Nergigante and that he'll leave on his own. And I just want you, my audience, to know that if you commented that, you have my gratitude for showing me something I was not aware of. And that being your fucking stupidity. You're all wrong and I'm right. While it's true that this works for the Retreat Zora quest in the Everstream, this isn't that quest. This is the first encounter with Zora in the Great Ravine, and repelling Nergigante by doing about 250 damage to him is what flags the quest to finish. He will not go away on his own, because as soon as you hit the damage threshold, which Zora does not assist you with during this particular quest, you enter a cutscene and the quest ends. And for those of you who I can already hear typing that maybe they were commenting about the second encounter, I know they didn't, because in the second encounter of that video, I mentioned that I didn't need to repel Nergigante because Zora does it for you. And you can ignore that portion of the quest and just do that. That's exactly what I did. So basically, fuck you! Okay, I'm done. So anyways, with that all out of the way, I need to deal 250-ish damage to Nergigante without taking a hit. And let me tell you, this is absolutely terrifying. Now, this version of Nergi is heavily nerfed and missing a good chunk of the moveset, as well as all the spike mechanics, but he's still fast. I ended up using the Ghillie Mantle and just placing 2 barrel bombs on the run to get a good start, and then playing some hit and run a little bit with the Sword and Shield draw attack. Overall, Zora completed on the second attempt, because that just really seemed to work. Next, I went ahead and hunted a Rathian to get a camp unlock, which took me 2 tries, and was also terrifying and full of close calls. Then it was off to the Highlands and hunting a Tsitsiyaku for the same reason, unlocking a camp. Tsitsi was the third monster and last monster in the run I succeeded on the first attempt. Camp attained. This gives us another tool that we will be making excellent use for, that being the Glider Mantle. This allows us to deal bonus mount damage while worn, making mounting easier. More mounts equals more face bashing, and more time I'm invulnerable. So it's an extremely helpful tool for monsters that allow me to be more aggressive. Speaking of mounts, I want to finally talk about a cool little trick with mounts that is unique to Sword and Shield. Besides being the easiest mounting weapon in the game, Sword and Shield also has extremely high mount punish capabilities because of a little exploit you can do. For all other weapons, a mount finish is done with just one input of triangle, and then it does the thing. Some weapons charge said input like a greatsword, but such is not the case with the Sword and Shield. The Sword and Shield mount punisher is a 3-hit combo, and specifically one that actually requires 3 button inputs in order to complete. But the thing is, if you just wait a second between inputs, your character will restart the chain and then just do the first attack again. So when the monster presents itself for punishment, you can just sit on the monster's head, slapping the shit out of it all fucking day without being able to do a thing about it. It's just astronomical amounts of free damage until you forcibly cause a knockdown or a KO if you're hitting the monster's head. I've kept mounts going for like 15 plus free hits in multiplayer, and by the time you've kept the monster still for so long for your allies, it's basically already on its last legs. Silly ability, but this allows Sword and Shield's mounting damage to rival even that of Insect Glaive, which does damage whenever they shift mounting positions. But anyways, now we hit the first wall of the run. The first monster to cause a number of attempts to hit double digits. Paolumu. So here's the thing. Ahead of time, in preparation for Paolumu, I had been slowly collecting gear that gives me wind pressure resistance. Wind pressure is one of the very few skills in low rank you can stack more than 1 point in, and I knew Paolumu would likely be dangerous in this run if I didn't have it. And I managed to scrape together 3 points in prep for this hunt. 3 points was not enough. Strictly speaking, almost all of Paolumu's moves are very easy to avoid. There is one exception, however, and that is this little run attack where he kind of trips and falls to the ground. Pretty easy attack normally, even if there isn't that much of in the way of a telegraph. And it does so little damage that most people won't even blink at getting hit by it. But this time it matters, because if I can't get hit by it once, or I fail. And to make matters worse, he likes to do this attack directly after doing an extreme quick wind pressure hit on me. If I'm a little ways away from him, it's possible for me to Superman dive just in time if you do it the right way, which isn't always easy. But if you're right next to the Paolumu, getting hit by this little wind gust, this wind inhale, without maxed wind pressure negation is a guaranteed fail. I had to pull out all the stops combining constant flashes, sleep toads, mounts, flinch shots, pitfall traps, and after that, it still took me 10 attempts to kill this bastard. But after enough perseverance, he did finally go down. After getting across to the Vale, before we can spot the Great Gyros, we need Effluvial Master, a skill that allows us to traverse the map without taking effluvium map damage. The way to do this is, without going down below, is to make the Hornitar chess piece, which has the skill embedded in it. So we take some Hornitar quests and make both the chess piece for effluvium resistance as well as the Grease for a point in handicraft. One of the few damage skills I can actually use at this point in the game. Next is an uneventful Garotobon taking 3 tries, until I need to kill Great Gyros. Now, Great Gyros is in no way a required hunt, but we want the Great Gyros weapon so that we can apply paralysis to monsters. And Great Gyros will proceed to be a primary weapon tree that we use throughout most of the run. Decent raw in sharpness, a bit of affinity at high levels, and paralysis to boot. It's actually an underrated tree. Anyway, the difficult part about Gyros is, of course, not the monster itself, but the tens of small monsters around him as he hangs out in the middle of a massive pack of Gyros in Windrakes. Normally, this would be circumvented by using Torch Pods or Intimidator, but a fun fact is that while Torch Pods dispel effluvium, it actually fails to affect monsters that have been effluvium touched. So this Gyros in Windrakes will totally ignore my Torch Pods. Additionally, while Intimidator works on the Windrakes, Gyros are immune to the skill because the Great Gyros is their pack leader. So if the Great Gyros is aggroed to me, so will all the other Gyros in his pack. This left me with the solution of repeatedly flashing everything in the area and then pumping out as much damage as I could chain down on Great Gyros before I ran out of flashes and the small monsters started attacking me. And just rinse and repeat until I hopefully get a victory. On the first successful run of Gyros, this took only 6 attempts. But I would have to farm this monster a lot over the course of this run, and I got hit in this fight a lot. I would probably say that in terms of overall number of deaths across many successful attempts, Great Gyros is probably the highest death count in the entire run, but, you know, that's also cheating because I had to successfully hunt him like 15 times for my weapon. So I'm not really sure how valid that claim is. Fortunately, after just my first successful kill, I was graced with the parts I needed for the Gyros knife and the Gyros coil, which is another way I can get Effluvium Master with a different armor slot, giving me a little bit more skill freedom, since there are more useful chest piece armors in this run than there are coils. Next, I quickly did the special arena for Paolumu so I could make the Paolumu chest piece, which gives a point in Master Mounter, which makes mounting easier, combined with the effects of the glider and the natural mounting capabilities of the Sword and Shield, and what we can do to Legiana is frankly disgusting. I'm able to get mounts borderline consecutively, with only taking 2 hits after the first mount to get a second. Absolutely disgusting, if I do say so myself. Legiana went down real quick in only 2 attempts. Now, let's talk about the second big wall of the run, Odogaron. Fuck this Clifford-ass monster. Okay, so Odogaron was extremely difficult for this run, but probably not for the reasons that you may assume. Despite Odogaron's high speed and high aggression, and I did occasionally get hit by his attacks, his hitboxes are shockingly exact and precise, and many of his attacks are designed to hit players moving in specific directions, which actually makes him whiff a lot. Like, for example, here my controller died, and Odogaron had like an entire 15 seconds to attack me, and whiffed every single hit. In all honesty, in this kind of run, it's harder to get hit by him than it is to avoid him. However, there is one agonizing problem, and that is the small monsters. The Vespoids and Gyros are incessantly aggressive in this zone, and were a constant source of issues, especially this early when I'm incapable of capping the Intimidator skill, but there was nothing I could do other than just keep banging my head against the wall and making slight improvements into the formula until I got just the right setup and just the right amount of luck. It did eventually happen, but it took 23 attempts, more than double the size of our previous wall. By the time this was over, I was seeing red, and it's not just because I was fighting a gigantic red dog. After all, the fact that Odogaron itself was so easy and that it was just luck of the draw with the small monsters made this feel like a lottery. I had to take a week-long break after this before I could continue. When I finally did, I needed to prepare for Rathalos and Diablos. So I went ahead and killed a bunch of these birds for Screamer Sacks. They scream a lot. Diablos only took 5 tries. But what's important is that I needed Diablos materials for the next Gyros knife upgrade level, hence why I chose him first. I also went ahead and got the materials for an Intimidator charm, giving me a second point in the skill when I choose to spec for it. Up next was Rathalos, who also went down relatively smoothly after 7 attempts, using some barrel bombs and specking myself 3 points in Windproof. The second encounter with Zora is when you're finally allowed to ignore Nergigante, because Zora will nail Nergigante with lava until he dries him off by himself. I actually did this entire quest from the safety of the Cannon and Ballista line, by quitting immediately after the force spawn and restarting the quest. Zora's second encounter was one on the first attempt. Prior to entering high rank, I took care of some small errands, like grabbing the rest of the cat alliances, and quickly moved on. High rank Puke took me 3 attempts. Upon entering high rank, we may as well call this farming simulator, as that's pretty much what I was doing for a while. With access to high rank materials, I made a paralysis attack charm, and make some high rank Gajau pants in preparation for Beatotus when I eventually get to Iceborne for this video series. I then farmed high-rank Great Jagras for the high-rank chess piece for more Intimidator, as well as upgrading the Great Jagras weapon as high as it can go, since it's the easiest strong high-rank weapon that I can make, which will be useful for all my other farms. At this point, I hunt a few Paolumu for Windproof, and high-rank Great Gyros for materials for the charm upgrade and weapon upgrades, and I'm finally able to actually move on and progress. High rank Anjanath was not quite as easy as low rank, taking me 4 attempts. After that, I farmed some Vespoid materials and make high rank arms for paralysis attack, as well as the butterfly headpiece for 2 points in evade window. Pink Rathian was up next, though it was rather uneventful. Something worth noting, however, is that Pink Rathian's assigned quest is the only instance in which me reloading the quest doesn't prevent instant hostility. And Pink Rathian will aggro to you immediately in the assigned quest the second time you're in the area. Just something I thought was worth noting. Believe it or not, she went down in just 2 attempts. With Pink Rathian slain, we get access to 7-star monsters. So I hunt Diablos for the high-rank Great Gyros weapon upgrade, and then it's off to the Elder's Recess. Among the Recess monsters, the only one that we are fighting is Dodogama for materials for a camp. Same with Barnos. Once I have all the camps, I set my botanical research to farm materials needed for barrel bombs in preparation for a specific Elder Dragon, and grab the Gajalaka Alliance so I can recruit a high-damage Palico friend against the Elder Dragon fights and teleport around the map using their cave system. With all of that, I am prepared as much as I possibly can for this last stage of the run, where I must climb the mountain of the final 4 Elder Dragons. And first up is Nergigante. go well. Okay, so Nergigante racked up the biggest fail count of this entire run. Straight up. And while he has no elemental shenanigans going on, and all of his attacks are well telegraphed, there are a couple issues. First is that a few of his hitboxes are much wider than they appear, with one of the bigger culprits being this attack here, which has a hitbox that spans the entire length of his tail, even as it swings around sporadically, making it hit behind the monster and in the opposite direction of the attack, and also a good 20 feet behind it, not just a little bit behind it. The much, much, much bigger issue are these little bunny hops. Nergigante is an all-out aggressive fighter, and he has this move, which he can use to pretty much instantly move him from anywhere in the arena to right next to and facing the player, or Palco, depending on who he's targeting. This move has zero startup or telegraph, and is next to impossible to avoid. It does just the tiniest amount of completely insignificant chip damage, and it can't be blocked. In a normal playthrough, you probably don't even consciously register this attack when it happens. But in this instance, that single hit is an instant kill. He does this attack most frequently when you're farthest away from him, and won't do it at all if he's flash potted. So the best method of reducing the probability of this move coming out is to maintain aggro while keeping close and in front of the monster as much as possible, and flashing it as consistently as I can. Realistically, however, this wasn't enough, because he likes to spam this bunny hop like it's fucking nothing. So pretty much the second he gets the opportunity to use it, he will. Because here's the thing. Lowering chances of it doesn't stop the attack, and most of my attempts had less than a minute of actual combat in them. In one attempt, I managed to carefully and watchfully, through use of hit-and-run tactics and the fact that he can't enter the camp, have an attempt long enough to move him to another area. But this presented a new issue I had not anticipated. Unless I have the Ghillie Mantle on, monsters already aggroed to you will spot you pretty much the instant you enter the arena, which is likely not going to be close to the monster at all, prompting a high chance for a bunny hop. For an idea of just how fast this is, I tried here to fire a flash pod before Nurgi could aggro the second I got in range. And I got bunny hop chipped from all the way across the arena before my pod had even fully traveled to where the Nergigante used to be. Sometimes he'll do it for the hell of it, even when you're close to him. In the end, I couldn't completely prevent him from doing the bunny hop, not even close. But I kept throwing myself at it and kept attempting and refining my run. My run started by grabbing some slinger ammo, drinking mega potions with a might seed, grabbing a Godchalaka, and entering the arena from this side using the caves, where I start the encounter with a flint shot to tenderized, followed by a mount. This was the best start I could come up with, and it takes like 2 minutes at the beginning of every attempt to run this loop, only to restart it in less than a minute of fighting. This is all to say that this fight was spiritually taxing, let's go with. Before, I had mentioned that the Vitality Mantle was only usable against damage that is otherwise completely unavoidable. This bunny hop is the single instance of damage in the entire run that this applies to. There is legitimately, as far as I can tell, no way to fully prevent bunny hops for the entirety of the hunt, and no consistent way to tell when they are going to happen and avoid taking damage from them other than hitting the lottery. This is the only instance of damage that is unavoidable in the game. Not even Vol's Effluvium is as unavoidable as this fucking bunny hop. But I really didn't want to use it, even though I allowed myself the mantle in the rules for this specific purpose. I had a personal goal of not using it throughout the run. This is the sole exception to that. But I put in a bunch of efforts to clear Nergigante without the mantle. So much so that I had fully learned and mastered his fight otherwise. And that I easily cleared the hunt on the very first attempt with the Vitality Mantle. But it was still an entire week of attempts to succeed. Overall, Nergigante took me 40 attempts. the highest attempt count in the entire run, though not by as much as you might think. After Nurgi, every single Elder Dragon required specialized builds that I had to come up with in order to deal with them, and that meant farming. Yay! First was Pink Rathian gear farming. This was to make Tool Specialist and Poison Duration. This was in preparation for Xeno'jiiva, as we are using a similar strategy and tactic to deal with Old Xeno as we did in the no-hit run. However, we are also just going to be able to use this build for the Tool Specialist for another monster as well. Next, we farm Dodogama a little bit more and make Vambraces for Bombardier and make a Bombardier Charm. I just noticed I actually wrote Bombardier in my script. That's right, this build is all about making MILFs explode! Okay, so all of this is in preparation for Vaal Hazak, and I make 2 builds and loadouts for this fight to cycle between. The big problem with Vaal is that he makes an effluvium cloud around him when he fights. Sometimes it's only around him, some attacks make a giant cloud of it all around him. He also likes to leave a cloud trail behind him when he moves, much like Tron. This damage cannot be mitigated. The Effluvium Expert skill that I have does not prevent Vaal's Effluvium, only Map Effluvium. One might think I can farm Miasma Jewels, but Effluvial Resistance, the skill you get from Vaal's armor and through decorations, doesn't actually prevent damage from effluvium clouds. It only prevents the effluvial status buildup. But you'll still take damage from being in the clouds. Unlike the bunny hops, however, there is a way to avoid taking damage from the cloud. Just don't be in the cloud, and play it like it's a game of Snake. Unfortunately, this means that we are unable to get within a certain distance of Vaal, making our melee weapons rather useless. However, because the 3 ranged weapons are against our rules, we need to come up with an alternate source of damage. That source of damage is Bombardier. So we have one build designed to cap Bombardier. I'll go into combat with an item loadout to maximize Mega Barrel Bomb production. By bringing 2 Megas, 2 Larges, 5 Barrels, gunpowder made from Metroshrooms and Fire Herbs, and Devil's Blight, we can make 9 Mega Barrel Bombs with 1 set of items. We can also use Falling Boulders to keep Vaal in place temporarily and get free hits using the Ghillie Mantle. Once all of the bombs are used up, Farcaster back home, switch to the alternate set with Tool Specialist to get the Ghillie Mantle get back quicker, and then restock all my items. This also has the added benefit of running Vaal's aggro timer out, and that puts him back into his default mode where he won't hit you on sight, and then we run back in. Rinse, repeat, victory. At least that was the plan. I failed 10 times, and mostly from this one particular attack of Vaal's. That's right! The roar, of all things, was giving me trouble. See, Vaal puts out a huge cloud, taking up about half the arena every time he roars. And because the roar staggers, I'm unable to get out of the cloud in time. So during the dance of keeping in front of Vaal and dropping bombs while he chases me around, if he roars, which Vaal does a lot, if I'm within like 30 feet of him, it's an instant game over. So the build wasn't good enough. After 10 failed attempts, I determined that Tool Specialist and Bombardier wasn't enough to win this fight. I needed 5 points in earplugs too. Back to the farm. Fortunately, there is one monster that provides both earplugs and Bombardier. It's Zorah Magdaros. So I ran that quest a few more times. Prior to starting, I went and farmed Barnos for the chest piece for Heatguard. This would be a skill I need against Teostra anyways, and it was already on my list of stuff to get. But now I can hang out on Zorah's back and destroy magma cores for extra gear from Broken Part rewards. This was at least the thought process. However, I learned something interesting during this return to Zorah. There is no way to prevent this attack from happening as best as I can tell. It affects the entire map, launches you into the air, does a good chunk of damage to the player, and can't be blocked, dodged, or avoided. Unfortunately, since this can be avoided by not going onto Zorah's shell, as per proof of my original attempt at Zorah that I completed first try earlier, I'm not allowed to use the Vitality Mantle. And this means, once again, no Magma Core breaks allowed. Or so you thought! Yeah, I found out there's actually a short time where you can shoot one of the magma cores with the ballista during the short period that Zora walks by the artillery placements. Huh, who knew? To further complete the loadout with more earplugs and bombardier, we make parts of the high metal set as well as hunting Diablos to make the earplugs charm. Put it all together and hey, you know what? This is kind of a fit, actually. This allows me to run away out of cloud range comfortably whenever Vol roars, making the fight much easier. It only took me 3 more attempts to bring him down, making the total attempt count for Vol 13. Up next was Teostra, who I brought Heat Guard for and paired for with the Windproof and Paralysis attack. I don't actually know if Teo does wind pressure or not, but I know Luna does, so I figured I might as well bring it in case. To be honest, this is also kind of a fit, not gonna lie. Not that our fit worked. So as it turns out, Heat Guard isn't enough to make you safe from being near Teostra. The aura does fire status buildup, and being afflicted by that is game over. After 12 failed attempts, I sought to update my strategy. There are 2 ways of preventing being afflicted with fire blights. The first is to wear the Fireproof Mantle, but this isn't an option for us because of the quest Fiery Convergence. Quests where you hunt multiple monsters are not realistic given the constraints of this run. It takes enough attempts just to hunt one monster successfully one time. The much easier method is to get 20 or more fire resistance. Easiest way to achieve this is, of course, the fire resistance skill, so it's off to farm Anjanath and Wrathblows to fully upgrade a fire res charm. Unfortunately, this puts us just shy of 20 fire res due to the negative resistance on our armor. So I replaced the coil with a Diablos one, which just doesn't look as cool. It's really unfortunate. But now, fully immune to fire, I blew through this quest. Look, I'm going to go over this quickly because, frankly, I don't know how I succeeded this quest. Teostra is simply the hardest monster in this run to deal with in terms of direct movesets and dealing with said movesets. He runs at you super fast, has huge area of effects. It's just a pain. All I could do was keep attempting it, getting more and more stressed and paranoid the longer an attempt goes. I, frankly, at the very end, feel like I still have no idea how to best approach this fight, and that my eventual success was due to complete sheer luck. I don't know how my successful run is different from any other attempt. Despite Nergi causing more failed attempts, Teostra is the hardest monster in this run, and if it weren't for an unimaginable stroke of luck on one random attempt, I probably would have been there a lot longer. 35 attempts. Kushala is next. So, everyone told me that wind pressure resistance doesn't do anything against this monster, and in order to circumnavigate the wind, you need Kushala's set bonus. These people are incorrect. Wind resistance, while yes, not allowing you to fully get around the aura, does so much in this fight. The tornadoes stagger you, for example, if you get near them. With wind pressure, instead they don't stagger you at all until you go to the very center of the tornado, at which point they do damage, which causes a game over in this instance. However, the risk of damage here is more than enough to be worth the extra walking space. There's also just a ton of attacks that no longer stagger you for being nearby due to wind resistance. And honestly, the aura barely does shit anyways. You need to be right fucking under Kushala, sucking his dragon cock in order to be hit by it. Even with the sword and shield's range, I never had issues hitting with him. I had to purposely and actively try to get staggered by it in order to bring you this footage during my first test runs, testing the capabilities of wind negation against him before any real attempts. And not once in any real attempt at this monster did I actually get hit by the wind aura. Ever. So yeah, we're taking wind resistance and you're all full of bullshit. There really isn't much more to this fight than that. He's tough and a solid wall, and it took me a while to kill him. But unlike Teo, I could actually feel progress and feel myself getting closer every attempt. You're also able to use Falling Boulders and Nitro Toads and Paratoads against him too, assuming you're lucky with where he goes, which makes things a lot easier. 39 attempts, only one less than Nergigante, and genuinely not much more to say. All that's left is Xeno'jiiva. Not gonna waste your time with this either. Xeno was uneventful. Yeah, you gotta be careful not to get stepped on, and yes, this did cause me a good number of fails. But a majority of this fight is me walking around in a ghillie mantle, smoking him out with pink Rathian gear, dropping a couple bombs, and then Farcastering out to reset my items. Every attempt at this run took a minimum of like 15 minutes, usually closer to 25 to 30. That's it. 19 attempts. Yay! We did it! We beat the game without getting hit. Once again, if this video turns out well in reception, I will start working on Iceborne. Have a nice day, folks.